Yeah, we're live. Excuse me, 5:16. Hopefully everybody's doing well. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the guys that's right. Go out to the guys in Southern California. I'm in Northern California, so we're not really affected by it, but that's craziness going on with the big fires down there. That's nuts. So we want everybody to be safe and happy. And shame on all the people making negative comments about this. That's ridiculous, guys. That's shows ignorance. But tonight we want to talk about boost response. And so we want to talk about that. The two examples I'm going to give you are both Honda examples. And so it shows a pretty big difference in two things that we tried when we were testing two different combinations. But it shows that you have to be, mindful of the things that you're selecting, not just for, hey, look, we made a lot of power. Because in both instances, the situations both made lots of power, but they did it differently. And so when you're looking at it and, you got to make sure that, hey, look, and tailor the thing to like where you want the boost to be. It's kind of important. So the first one was a B series test that I did. We had a B16 on the engine dyno back when Westech had their 901, which would allow reverse rotations motors on there. And so they had an adapter to run a Honda, and shout out to the guys for making all that happen because I'm the only one that used it. So it's kind of awesome. But I ran a lot of B series stuff back then. We put a little B16 turbo on there and ran it. And one of the tests that we did that dramatically affected the response rate of the turbo, because we kept the turbo the same during both tests. And so there was no change in the turbo itself, just in the configuration of the motor. And one of the changes that we did was go from a stock P30 intake manifold. We also ran a Type R manifold on it. It's a very common upgrade. In fact, factory Civic Type Rs had the B16, the Type R motor. I think it's a B16B. And so that you could use the Type R manifold on there. It was interchangeable because the Type R B18 had a P30 based intake or P30 based head, not like the GSR. The GSR head was different and required a different intake manifold. But we tried one of the then new Victor X intake manifolds from Edelbrock. So it was a short runner, big plenum kind of manifold. In looking at it, the kind that you'd go, oh yeah, that's what we want for. And I would argue maybe a step up above what were common back then were these kind of fabricated box manifolds. Now we would call them snipers or something because they were basically easy to produce. So they had a CNC flange and then tubes, and then went out to a box with a throttle body mount. Oh, these are the turbo manifolds. Yeah, only they're not turbo manifolds. They're just shorter runner manifolds that don't make as much power as the stock stuff. But the Victor did and did pretty good on the big end. In fact, one of the motors that I dyno tested for the gentleman that ended up buying my Civic and going out and setting records, shout out to John. But the motor that they had put together and run, he ran that Victor intake manifold on there, and it did very good. It did especially good at very, very high RPM, which theirs ran lots of RPM. And so they on their NA motor, that motor made a lot of power. In fact, that might be the most powerful one. I think that made 240 or 250 at the tire. So that might have been the most powerful one that I had tested at the time. But it did well. But we tried putting this Victor intake manifold on there, and not surprisingly, compared to the factory intake manifold, compared to the factory P30 intake manifold, when we ran it naturally aspirated, because like I like to do, we like to run them both ways. Let's run it NA and let's run it boosted so that we can correlate the difference. And this is one of the arguments I get into with people a lot about camshafts, is the reason that they don't know what camshafts do is because they only do a camshaft and put it on with a turbo and, hey, look how much power I made. Great. You didn't compare it to anything. And you also don't know what it does NA. So I guarantee you that it would have done the same thing NA, but forget about that. But on this application, when we put this Victor X intake manifold on this B16, it lost power down low, and particularly through one distinct middle part of the curve. And because it did that, guess what it did to spool up on the turbo? It definitely hurt spool. So under boost, we saw an even more pronounced change in power output with that intake manifold. And even though it looked cool and did charge hard on the big end, so if you're going to 9,000 or whatever, in the case of a B series, it would work pretty good, and then would work good on a bigger version of that motor, not a B16, but a B18 or B20, and would be, maybe a better choice. But definitely high RPM kind of thing, ported heads, lots of camshaft and that sort of stuff. But when we ran it, comparing it with the turbo setup that we had on there, it lost 43 foot-pounds of torque at a fairly low boost level at 5,500 RPM, which is kind of the important part of the, normally that's going to be right near where the crossover is from the primary cam to the secondary cam. And so that's kind of a critical area. And we did everything that we could to make sure that the, transition from one cam to the other was right, because we know about that. But there was a big drop in boost. So the intake manifold can have a big effect. Obviously, we see this on every other combination too. We see when we do short runner stuff on LS motors or Dodge Rams or whatever we put it on, that like a single plane manifold, when we do that, it loses power. And then so when it loses power under boost, less response, less power. Another example of this where we saw a big change in boost response, and again, not necessarily a change in peak power, where I was comparing the different turbos on the K24 Honda when we ran it with the guys at Skunk. What we did was I ran it at a bunch of different boost levels because I like to do that and get our nice railroad tracks because we could see what's going on. Hey, look, 2 more pounds, added more power. And that's kind of what they do. And then we ran those over 600 horsepower, I think, is where we ran the K24. But while we were doing it, we ran a bunch of different turbos. And one of the interesting comparisons was in this power level, in this 600 or sub 600 horsepower power level, we compared a 67 millimeter precision that I had, and then an RB, an RB24, RB26. We had the GT45, and then we had a 7875 from VS Racing. And then we had another turbo that I think was a 78 millimeter from the guys at Force Performance. Honestly, those were really LS turbos. We had those because we were running them on a bunch of LS applications. But I thought, hey, we have a turbo on there, or we have a motor on there. It's a B series, or a K series. It's even bigger, because it's a K24 instead of a K20. So let's try these other turbos and just see what they do. And not surprisingly, the bigger turbos, although they made plenty of power, and I didn't look up to see if they both had maps on them, because it'd been cool to see if they had maps on them and see where we were, if maybe we were getting into a surge situation with these bigger turbos on these smaller displacement, higher RPM, lower output, down low kinds of motors. But we ran the same thing. And with the bigger turbo that came up softer at 5,000 RPM on the K24, we had a difference of just over 100 foot-pounds of torque. So that is forever on 100 foot-pounds of torque is a lot on anything, but even more so when you're comparing, something that doesn't have 800 or 900 foot-pounds, something that has 300 or 400 foot-pounds. 100 is a big percentage of that. And so this is the spool rate of the turbo. This is why we want, and we constantly talk about, I put a post up today on Facebook and Instagram talking about, a pro tip on turbos. But when we're looking at turbos, it's very important, and this is why we stress this, the first thing that we want to look at is you want to figure out how much power you want to make. Okay, that's going to narrow down our turbo selections. Now, what do you want? Do you also want to spool up? Because you can't have 1,500 horsepower and immediate spool. Those are going to be opposite ends of the spectrum, unless you have a 1,000-inch motor that you could spool that up with. But that's not realistic. And so you have to be realistic about the things that you want. And do you want, it's hard to get immediate spool up and all of the horsepower. So if you have a realistic amount of horsepower, and then you could work on the spool up, you could do that with hot side and cold side, honestly. You could do that with turbo sizing. Hey, look, just be realistic. Maybe you have 2 turbos. Maybe you have a turbo that you put on the street and you're driving it around, and it spools up, like a light switch, and you're ready to go. And you drive that all around. If you go to the track, put the bigger turbo on, you're power braking or two-stepping it or whatever you're doing, and then go out, and then you could run this giant, big mile an hour thing and make all the power. But it's not as good. It works on the track, but not as good when you're driving on the street. And then when on the street, you get one that's super spooly and works good. And in this case, for us, what we were looking for on the K series, and to some extent on the B series, I just want to see how that intake performed. And on the K series, we just wanted to try a bunch of different turbos. I was never under the impression, and nor was I giving the impression, that all these turbos were right for this. They just happen to be ones that I have. Just like when I did the first Big Bang, and also when I did the compound turbo, I didn't do that because there was science behind it. I did it because those are what I had. With the Big Bang thing, with the first Big Bangs, using those 276s, those were inexpensive. Those are something that guys could have used, and they were big enough for what we were doing. When we did the compound thing, hey, I got this turbo and I got this turbo. Let's cross-mogenate. Let's make them all work. Let's do it. And I think it upset a lot of the compound guys because they're like, oh, you didn't do this right. You got to do it with this kind of math and this. I'm like, look, all that's fantastic. And were I doing a compound setup to make it work for some specific application where I was trying to achieve a given goal, other than having a compound turbo system on the dyno, that was my goal. And they didn't realize that. And so, but all that stuff happens. So let's, the important thing is size your turbo right, obviously, for your combination of boost response and power output. And then, like, if I was trying to do a 600 horsepower turbo for a K series, I'd pick a small turbo. I'd pick one that was good for 600 or 650 or 700 or something like that. Not a 1,000 horsepower turbo like the 78, 75 Gen 2 that we had, or that Force Performance turbo. I wouldn't pick those unless we were trying to march out and really run lots of boost in these things and make, trying to get to 4-digit power levels. Size the turbo for what you want. Same thing with the intake manifold. Pick the intake manifold for the RPM range that we want to run, and the effective RPM range that we want to run. If you want to run 9,000 and you have a 9,000 RPM manifold on there that's going to do well up there, don't expect it to also be good down at 2,000 or even 3,000 in the case of a Honda, or even 4,000. Don't expect it to be good there. Expect it to do the things that it's going to do up where it's designed to do. And so choose those things accordingly and know what the trade-offs are. Kind of important. There. Have you ever installed too big of a turbo on your street car? Have you ever erred on the big side and wish you would have went smaller? There. Untrue. Scottish Danny, what's going on? We are live. Boost is the breath of life. Sometimes, right? If you have to give mouth to mouth, that's technically boost, right? Baby Shark, Gregory, Steve-O. Sentra, you have selected too large of a supercharger for an application, right? So you can throw a yes in there. I know absolutely nothing about Hondas. They work the same way as everything else. I hope everyone's safe from the fire. Who are we doing tonight? How's the Holdner crew doing? The California wildfire. I see David Freiberger post. Freiberger's close because he lives in that area. I'm way north, so we don't see any of that. Hondas are the cars that you pull Ks out to stick into Miatas. Are there a lot of K swap Miatas? I can't remember seeing one of those, although it is ideal for that. There's like 5 fires. Yeah, there's a bunch going on. Opened up chat to a commercial. Boom. Nailed it. Well, you got it out of the way early, Alan. So let's see how my Spanish is. You want a motor, a Ford that is very good. I don't know what ESTIQUER is. STQ. I don't know what that is. Not a Honda guy, but I have a lot of respect for those guys doing crazy quarter-mile runs and making them all-wheel drive. The all-wheel drive Hondas are good. When I did the show with Chad, that fastest car thing, there was a guy there that had an all-wheel drive Honda, and it was impressive. It gets off the line pretty good. Coming in late, is he talking about velocity over volume of intake? Hondas were stepping on the way to a V8. Am I water trickling tonight? We are international. A stepping stone. It's -2 there, Eric. That's pretty cold. It was nice. It was beautiful here today. It's probably in the 60s, I would imagine. I was in shorts and stuff, out running with the dogs. -30. It's cold there. I'm in northern Michigan. But is it summertime in northern Michigan? Could the K24 A4 or A2 intake manifold make more torque down low and spool up the turbo quickly? More than what? Are you asking which one of those intake manifolds? An A4 or an A2? Just ask yourself which one of those is longer. Whichever one's longer spools the turbo up quicker. What are my thoughts on a 462 valve plenum spacer? Do they work? Is there any advantage? I don't think so. There are gains from changing the factory elbow. I call them elbows and throttle bodies on a 462 valve, particularly if you have a 462 valve that already has other things done to it, like ported heads and cam. There's definitely power to be had from getting rid of the factory elbow and throttle body. I wouldn't do that if you're doing boost. I would just run the stock ones. But I have videos up where we tested it, both NA and supercharged. Seemed to make a difference also supercharged. I wouldn't do it though. I mean, the AccuFab stuff, like the billet stuff, is really nice, and the throttle body is really, really nice. Because in my opinion, I don't know who does better throttle bodies than AccuFab. But if I was doing a turbo one, I would just use the stock stuff. Cold up in Manitoba. My small block Chevy Fox body and 2-liter Sentra have the same power, more or less, but the Sentra is much faster. Definitely doesn't have anything to do with gearing. I'm guessing the Sentra weighs a lot less than the Mustang does. What can I put a K24 in? There's lots of good stuff. I recognize the R26 twin turbo and GTR. I do like twin turbo Nissans, an RB26, or even whatever the newer ones are in the Godzilla Skyline deal. Those are cool. I put an 80mm turbo on my Sentra. There you go. I installed the 20G. I thought that putting the 76mm that Mahovitz lent me on the, and it is big, this older one that we ran on the B series Honda motor, I thought it was gigantic, but it's not compared to stuff that I've seen now. I installed the 20G on my 99 Eclipse. It was nice. Was about 400 horsepower range, pulled strong, enough boost to blow off the intercooler pipes frequently. Did that car come with a 16? I remember testing some of those on the chassis dyno. I thought that's what size it was. At any given time, part of Australia is on fire. Most of the time, the area is not populated. Yeah. There will be 15 commercials. I put an 88 to 102 on my LH8 Colorado. Is it an LH6? I love the old school Datsun electric car. I think it was on that show. Mine open to a commercial. It must be special. Is a 6062 Precision too big for a B16? Have a feeling with this turbo, a coworker's gifting will make good power, but won't spool. A 62 is going to be pretty good size on a B16. We usually run turbos that are a lot smaller than that. Dedicated T3s oftentimes, if we're trying to make a lot of power, we put I think we did a 62 millimeter, but we did I think we did a T3, T4 hybrid, and then went to, on the Bonneville stuff, they were all T4s. I think I'll make a plate for an M90 and try it. I also have an M45. You're going to put that on what? On the small block? The Fox is 2,600 pounds. The Sentra is 25. That's not much of a difference. Wonder how beneficial piston oil squirters actually are. It'd be worth it to put them. They use them on factory Hondas. Do you think a stock SS Trailblazer intake is just as good as an aftermarket one for 1,500 or for 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower range? Will it hold up without flexing too much, or just go aftermarket? On talking about Trailblazer SS intake manifold, you can easily do 1,200 horsepower with a Trailblazer SS intake manifold. The intake manifold is not going to hold you back. My GT30 83 turbine on a B18 doesn't see full boost until 5,000. Would a GTX 30 with a 63 spooled nose will be quicker, or should I try a T2 turbo? What power level are you trying to get to? Any idea how not to crack the Mitsubishi 2.6 Starion? Yeah, those have a propensity for cracking cylinder heads. Do you know how much power, how much boost are you running and stuff? Like, do you have anything else done to it? Do you have cams or ported heads or anything? M90 on the Sentra. I think you'd like the M90 on the Sentra. Isn't that what you have? Or do you have a 112 on there right now? I think you'd like a smaller blower than you have on there if you're having to bypass all the boost anyways. There's an evac north of the 210 for the Hearst fire. How not to crack heads with a turbo on it. Run much better gas in it would probably help. Like E85 probably would help that, and run the motor colder. Does polishing to the top end of a big block Chevy help with oil return, or does it just not really matter? It does matter. It will change the return rate of the oil, but that's not the question. The question is, does it not return fast enough right now? Do you have any videos on running a supercharger with compressed air? Do you mean they're not running a supercharger with compressed air? They're just using the compressed air as the form of supercharging. I haven't done a video on it. I was there when they did the first one at West Tech, but I haven't done a video on it. Should I pay extra for the 12-blade turbo, or is this a marketing gimmick? It's a few $100 extra over the same turbo with an 8-blade. The more blade probably is going to respond better. The response rate is going to be better, and the dynamic range might be wider. But I'm hoping that they have tests to show you what they do. 350, 400, my first Gen CRX. My second gear seems too long. I get bad lag in city driving. Is it 400, 14 pounds is 400 flywheel then, right? Not 400 wheel horsepower? Bigger cans, but not installed yet. That's bigger turbo. If I remember right, it was 20 pounds. Last head, it cracked in 3 places. Uh-oh. Made 526 to the wheels with my Han Racecraft 25G. 10 centimeter housing exhaust on the 97 Eclipse. Well, 525 to the wheels has to be a fairly good amount of boost. I didn't know Honda made cars. I've been trying to figure out how to boost the CBR. It should be correct at the flywheel. I watch a lot of YouTube. I've not seen a commercial in 5 or 6 years. A subscription, a few dollars commercials so far now. The next thing, others complaining about commercials. So is that more problematic than the commercials themselves? So this one was like 600. Let's see where we were with the B series. I think that I'm pretty sure that was a turbo B16. Okay, so this is a 57 millimeter turbo. That one made 350. And then over 400. And then down just over 300. But it's not coming on until after, like, right at the VTEC point, 5,500 or so. So that's a 57 millimeter turbo. When we ran the other stuff on there, let's see. Yeah, that's a lot more responsive. So this one is that's a Turbonex T3. And that one did 325, although I don't think it's going to go a whole bunch over that, but it was way more responsive. I mean, that one was also up 152, 220. That was up like 70 foot-pounds at 5,300. Did you do any demos with the GTX 30? I should look for I haven't done it. We've run a pair of not GTX 30s, but GT30 76s. No, I take that back. I think we ran 3582s. We didn't run the 30s. I just told my wife I was getting a subscription. Just saw a video with a 5-liter with Hemi heads getting right down the strip pretty quick. A 5-liter what? A 5-liter Mustang? And what kind of Hemi heads are they? Have you guys seen any of the Red Bull drag races that they do? Like, I saw one with a Ninja H2R, a Formula One car, an F16, a Challenger 605, which is like a private jet, and then an Aston Martin and a Tesla and a Lotus. Has anybody seen those? I watched a couple of those, and it was pretty impressive. And Mike, what kind of Hemi heads are they? Are they a late model Hemi? Do they share the same bore spacing? It seems like a fair bit of work. Especially since there's no shortage of good cylinder heads for 500 Mustangs that just bolt right on. But I salute people doing weird stuff. Because weird is good. That's what we need. We need more weirdness in the world. Wow. 105 million views. I guess Red Bull's got it going on. I missed the response of my T3 T04E and my L28. I'm running the HX35 billet compressor wheel with a 7 millimeter housing. Let me try to find an 8 millimeter housing. Maybe I'll be a little closer to 0.63 AR. I was talking to Oliver today about the L28. We were reminiscing about the Nova and stuff. He's the guy that won the Nova. Can I translate this stuff? Let's see. Channel activity. No, none of that does that. Looking for a way to translate. I'm curious. Have you ever installed too big of a turbo on your streetcar? And have I ever spelled this correctly or incorrectly? I didn't spell your right. That's okay. We're all good. Would you consider the LSXR T intake to be as good as the LSXR Fast? I have truck accessories and can't run the LSXR. Trevor, they make the exact same power curve. They're identical. Every time I've tested them, the power curve has been exactly the same. In fact, what I did on one of them was interchange the lid from the LSX HR onto the LSXR just to change the plenum volume, and that essentially did nothing. Eclipses with 272, 278 cams, Forester intake, 4 draws and pistons, Boucher ported the head. Okay. What's a Forester intake? Not the Subaru, right? Those motors can make good power. I like all the factory turbo stuff because it's so easy. It's hey, let's just run more boost and do fun stuff. My brother installed a 67 millimeter turbo on a K24 Civic. Power doesn't come on until 550, 500. Red line is 8. You shift and it falls out of boost. Too big of a turbo. Okay. That's where we were running this one to 8,000 also. But yeah, if you're not staying in VTEC, that doesn't help you. My Eclipse is stock. Hope this is entertaining. Makes 15 pounds of boost. Feels like 200 wheel horsepower. Did they make 15 pounds stock? Adrian, what is your T88H? I had 2 turbo rigs, 7.3 power strokes on 3/4 ton 4x4s at times. They were too small. The turbos were too small for the diesel motors? Pretty sure they made 8 to 10 pounds on the stock ones. That's kind of what I was thinking for stock stuff. And a 2JZ, so slow is cool. Oh, an 88 millimeter and a 2J? That would be forever. Especially a low compression one. It's not very sporty. The owner before me, he did some weird stuff with the car. Has a stock turbo. Pure turbonium. There. Honda first gear. Bought over 200 plus spark plugs from Advanced Auto since they're going out of business. They're going for pennies on the dollar right now. Is this stuff available online, or is it because you should buy all of the NGK TR6s or something? It's my issue with turbo B18 CRV. What's the B18V? I don't know what the B18V is. GT30 max speeding turbo doesn't make boost till 5,000. There's a GTX 3076 on eBay for 300. You should show your brother. You should be able to put a turbo on a B18 that makes power a lot sooner than that. I think it was 9.5 to 1. Oh, on the 2J. And the factory turbo ones were less. Large plenum, medium length runner, bell entrance runners, very large cross section. They were tapered a lot to the head. Use 102 millimeter throttle body. Okay, so is it some that's the name for some custom intake manifold? Contemplating oil squirters, my North Star, but I really don't want to reduce any oil pressure. I wonder if I could run an external oil pump just for the squirters. Why are you wanting squirters? B18 non VTEC with a B16 head. So it's a B18 hybrid then, right? An LS VTEC. Should try to chat with Brent at PFI Speed about what? That's Auto Parts is only having a sale in person. That's what I thought. Online still shows regular prices. LS head gaskets are selling for $9 a piece. I don't know if we have an advanced auto here to help the pistons cool. Okay. Good crossover if available. Yeah, are you saying that Brent would be a good person to do an interview with? Oh, okay. Because he's done cool like race stuff. Wow. Yeah, that's super laggy. Do you think, Eric, that the pistons are having a problem right now without oil squirters? Because I think most motors don't have oil squirters. About all TR6 spark plugs available. What other spark plugs you recommend for boost on the LS? I don't know if we can get those at the, and anything that's cold is fine. Anything that's cold and is the right style plug, like is a 3/4 reach gasketed plug, which is normally what we use. Some of them are tapered seat plugs. Like a lot of the LS stuff, particularly the factory heads, are tapered seats. But we run gasketed stuff on those all the time. Mitsubishi 2.6s would crack all the time. Welding never fixed them. It's an LS VTEC hybrid. Yeah, I tried a lot of my own weird and JB weld a cylinder support in the block and put some H beams. Now my next thing is I'm scared it's going to blow the all-wheel drive trans. What are they doing? The drag race guys, what are they doing to strengthen those all-wheel drive units? They got to be doing something to them because they're. It's not hard to make power with turbo Honda stuff. So they're making way more power than those things were ever designed for. Especially if you're shock loading at a drag strip. Let's wind those things up and 822 shafts and billet outer cases. Somebody's doing billet cases for the all-wheel drive stuff. Wow. It's pretty getting with the program. Dog boxes. Lots of ability goodness in those. I'm all for that. I'm all for ability goodness. Shock loading stuff, like dumping clutches and stuff, or two steps or any of that for manual transmissions. That's just hard on stuff. I put turbos on, it might get hotter just for assurance and longevity, peace of mind. Okay. None of the LS stuff has piston squirters on it that people are running turbos on. So it obviously works without that. If you want to put squirters on it, that's all good too. Not yet, but one of these days I'll put twin 88s on a slant 6. Yeah, that's definitely recommended because one of those wouldn't be 15 times the power output that the thing could make anyway. But that's okay. It's all good. You definitely need two of them. It would look good it'd be a good slant 6 SEMA build. speaking of that, if I get the Dodge 2.2 or 2.5, either one of those back up on the dyno, which I will, I need to do a twin turbo one of those just because. Sequentials help the turbo Civic stand boost, but the transmissions are going for 10 grand. Yeah, it's hard when you get to that power level. Jimmy is looking into some of the transmissions for his NSX because he's, it's going to be really easy, I think, to get to, not easy, but to make enough boost to get to 1,000 horsepower even with that J35. And you just, the transmissions were like, hey, look, we were designed for 250 horsepower. Let's just stay back here in the reality world. Yeah, Prestige. I don't think a slant 6 would spool a 88. I don't think it'd ever make boost. You just have to give it enough nitrous to get the turbo to get in its happy spot. Doesn't the LS9 have factory piston squirters? It might, but none of the junkyard stuff that people are putting turbos on and racing have piston squirters. I think that they're good ideas, particularly if you're doing for endurance stuff. You have to balance the oil control when you're doing that, though. Richard, when you tested the 8711 cam, how was the piston to valve clearance? The 248 is not a problem. The 234 can be a problem. I don't remember what it was. It was enough so that we would run it. Richard, have you ever heard anyone running SCE Vulcan head gaskets in an LS? I've heard of the SCE stuff, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody run them. But I'm not out there everywhere. My next upgrade is a viscous coupler on my CRV. All-wheel drive cuts out at 60 kilometers an hour. A street turbo engine will benefit from an oil cooler. Yeah, unfortunately, I wouldn't have written down what the piston to valve clearance is in the notes either. And honestly, I can't swear to you that we checked piston to valve clearance on. I was thinking that we did, but I may have just called Brian Nutter from Summit, and he said, yeah, that cam will fit. When he said that, I'm hoping that he had tested it. Rich, just dropping by for a few. I'm practicing my head porting. Nice. Got a notification. So one GT45 is not enough for 700, 800 wheel horsepower. It's not enough for 800 wheel horsepower, no. 2 GT45s is too much. Sweet spot would be twin GT35s. Yeah, and for 800 wheel horsepower, I might think about 2 twin GT3076s. I mean, yeah, 3076s I think would be good for that range, even better than 35s. That's what I was wondering about, an external oil pump for the squirters. Okay. Yep. You can do all the machining and all that. I like the video that I got to see how on the 2.2 liter Dodge turbo cams, how they do the oiling in them. How with every revolution, there's an opening section, that a little slot that comes out and then squirts oil on the lobes. I thought, wow, that's because we get to what we did was spin the thing with the drill, so we had oil pressure, and then rotate the motor over slowly, and then you could see it. You're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good of them to think about that, especially on a basically flat tapping cam, not a roller. The other ones were rollers. It's always good to have on tap, to have more. Yeah, you could do that. But like I said, when you do that, you trade response. We also got a Ranger 5.3 LS, a sloppy mechanic stage 2 and 7875 to fire up, holding 53 psi of oil pressure. That's good. That's a good sign. So polishing the top to improve oil returning back to the oil pump. Okay. Yeah, you can do that. It will make it better. Again, the question before, the same thing, is that is it not good now? Does it have a problem with oil staying at the top, or is that why you're trying to do that? Yeah, Jake, you have stock 706 heads on it. You didn't do anything to them. You didn't port them, or especially on a 6-liter, you didn't unshroud the valve or anything. Too big of a turbo only means you have too small of a motor. That's good. Mark Steele did a 427, LS7, LS9 top end hybrid, and installed piston squirters from the LS9. That's for a road race setup. That was my point. For a road race setup or some application where you're putting sustained temperature in there, for drag racing, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Terminator X or Fuel Tech 600 off-road M90D 4-liter Jeep with all the goodies. MS3 Pro. I don't think you have a bad choice. I don't think any of those are bad. I don't know anything about Fuel Tech, but the Terminator stuff works fine, and the MS3 Pro stuff works fine. Palacio, you have to translate that before you put that in there. Otherwise, I can't read it. I don't have it translated. Would it make a difference if I went with a turbo TC instead of a low stall to make it more responsive, at least spool it better with turbo T? Are you talking about a boost controller? What do you think about doing a video on a GT30 Gen 2? It seems like a new good budget option. Yeah, I don't know what I would test that on right now, but on small Hondas, there's a hole in the camshaft base circle right before the rocker arm hits the lobe. Having 706 ported in a month, just got to save a little money. There you go. M90 on the 2.2. Yeah, that would take some kind of custom intake manifold, but we might be able to do that. I might be able to make that work on the 2-piece intake manifold. We'd have to see about driving it though. The turbo is going to work a lot better. So given that would be, because that 2.2, the low compression 2.2 probably doesn't make 100 horsepower, is what we were calculating. Charlie Brown, yeah, a higher stall torque converter will help with response rate because you're just going past the area where there's no response. And a converter will help with acceleration regardless of what you do, whether you have boost response there or not. It will help it. It will help NA. I mean, it's a big change. Sounds like Rich is going to need a TIG welder to make some of these intakes for the blowers. Yeah, luckily what I'm thinking of is I already have a plate that bolts to the blower. So really for most of these things, I just need a box that plate attaches to. And then I have to position that box so that we can just get a drive to the drive pulley on the blower. So we can mount the blower sideways, I think. I don't think that'll be a problem. Washington, Richard, I have a 2008 Silverado 4-wheel drive, collapse lifter on cylinder 6. How do I fix it? Sometimes you can take the push rod or a big stick, something long, and push down on it, I can tap it sometimes with a hammer. We've done this on the dyno before. Brulee's done this. If you get a lifter that's stuck down at the bottom and won't come back up, it's because it's lodged on the lifter wall. What word am I thinking of? The plunger is stuck on the wall. So sometimes you could free it up, and sometimes when you free it up, it starts working right. Sometimes it keeps sticking down in that same spot. So then you have to replace it. But sometimes you could free it up. I would try that and see what happens. 100 horsepower 2.2, we've come a long way. Yeah. I mean, the good ones, the Shelby ones were 110 or something like that. With the more compression and the altered cam timing that they did in them, they retarded the camshafts. But yeah, they could, and we could make more than that. Obviously, put the cam in it and port the head. I've got the Vizard head, and I've also got another head from the guys at the car farm. Really, I think the thing needs more compression. I think it needs to be 9.5 or 10 to 1, and let's just run E85 in it and be done with it. So I think with that combination of stuff, what I would like to do is I would like to see one of those do 150 naturally aspirated. And I don't think that that's a lot to ask for a 2.2 liter motor. That's not anywhere near 100 horsepower per liter. But if we could get it to make 150, then instead of going from 100 to 200 with 14 pounds, we're going from 150 to 300. So it's a much better deal. M112 on a 2 liter. Yeah, I just get into the same problem with it's just way too much blower for what we're trying to do. It's just way better. It's an LH6 motor. Yeah. 170 horsepower boosted 2.2. Yeah, the GLHS is 175 horsepower, the T2 versions. And that's what's in there now. And actually mine's making more boost than stock. So it's did a little better than that. I think I have the dyno results. I forgot what it made of the tire. I thought it was 160 or 170 at the tire. 871 on a 2.2. Do you think a single GT45 is enough for a 4200 to make 600 wheel horsepower? A single GT45 will easily make 600 wheel horsepower on a 4200. Richard, I found a couple of Vortec 8100 engines. Didn't end up pulling them. I saw there's almost no aftermarket for them and don't know their potential. They're big. They have lots of potential. Quake transmission or something like that. Yeah, that's expensive stuff. Yeah, you can put cams in them. You can put late model 454 cams in them, so that's not a problem. There are some heads for them, the Raylar stuff, but also there's some other things coming if they're not available yet. You can port the stock ones. There's some modified intake manifolds. There's a Dart intake manifold, but I'm not sure how good it is. But you can obviously boost them. Didn't you make 1500 with a turbo 8100? No, not anywhere near that. Half of, not even half that. Not even half that much. I think we might have made 800 foot-pounds or something, if I remember right. But big block Chevy turbo 8.1. Lots of header tests. Seven PSI, 848 foot-pounds, and 637 horsepower. Making peak horsepower at a whopping, made the same horsepower at 4,300, 4,400, and 4,500. Really storming there on the big end. Do you think a single GT35 82 would do 600, trying to get as responsive as possible? Yeah, I think it might. Yeah, I'd like to try it. I think certainly with the right GT35, you could do that. It's funny. I got an LH6 with non-functioning rocker arm, a number 6 cylinder. What big block broke the sensor on the dyno? That was it. That was that 8.1. It didn't break it because it was too strong. It broke it because the thing was ready to break. So is the Vortec 8100 good for boost versus a regular one? Let's say 1,000 horsepower. I don't know. I'd never run 1,000 horsepower with them. With the DoD delete, you can upgrade cam as best for power and daily for a 2008 Silverado. Washington, you should get one of my low buck truck cams. You're not going to find a better power curve and a better price for a cam than that. They're on sale now, richardholderperformance.com for an LH6. That's going to be a good choice. We're going to put one in an LH6 coming up here pretty soon. 366 would be a sweet spot. Yeah, that's a good turbo. And we're going to have some stuff here, Prestige, that you're going to like. We'll have stuff that will be right up that alley. LT made 1,000 horsepower, the Turbo 8100. He has build and drag racing videos on it. Yeah, with the, if you put we did that when it was stock. So if you did a ported head and cam, 1,000 horsepower shouldn't be a problem. Isn't the 8100 4-bolt main versus 6-bolt for the LS? The 6-bolt is just cross-bolted, but the main thing is the main webbing and the block is not really what I'm concerned with. It's always going to be a piston or a rod if you have stock stuff in it. It's not going to be the block. The one thing that the 8100 is going to have is it's going to have a lot of torque. That's why I'd like to put a camshaft in it and an intake manifold that makes peak power not at 4,500 RPM, so that you don't have to have, 200 more foot-pounds of torque than you have horsepower. That's definitely a way to hurt something. Get it to be even, or even get it to have a little more horsepower than torque would be a better way to go. We could do that with a rising boost curve too, because that is, that adds some safety factor. How's our poll doing? We only got 1 or 2 more minutes left here. Have you ever installed too big of a turbo on your street car with your spelled incorrectly? No, 76%. I have. On the Sprint, I put a Volkswagen turbo on it from a 1.8T, and then also a Garrett T20, I think, which is we need it for making the power that we want to make, but it was not nearly as responsive as the factory turbo. What do you guys think of a 4L60 at 450 horsepower in a 3,300 pound car? Do you think that'll work, guys? Playing around the Terminator X, stock bottom end 351, AFR 185s. What would you say for timing, air fuel, and boost on E85? Do you have rain gap in it? On E85, I think you should probably be plenty safe at 20 degrees of timing. And it's not 20 degrees all the way across the board. It's less at the torque peak and less down low. Richard, will a single 525 pump going to be enough for 1,000 horsepower? I don't know. What pressure is that? How much power will it be at with a DoD delete and the cam? The cam that we have on a 5.3, is that on a 5.3? If it is, if it's on a 5.3, it makes like 415 to 425, depending on where you started at. It's going to add about 60 horsepower. And it's going to add power everywhere. If you go to the richardholderperformance.com, there's a graph up that shows you what the power curve looks like, because we obviously test all this stuff. 58.5 to 60. I was going to say 59.5 to 60, but 58, that's a good spread, though. That gives me a little bit more wiggle room. Thousand needs 2 525s, especially on the 85. That's what I'm worried about. And also, if his system pressure is like 58 or 60 psi, that's also kind of problematic. I have a 4060 in my Camaro, and I just bought a stage 2 cam. Hopefully it stays together. I have, if it's going to break, it's probably going to break on the second gear shift. GT35, LSV Tech. I'm building forge internals for my GSR. I can run 10 or 11 compression, depending on how thick of a head gasket. That seems like a big variation in compression for a head gasket thickness change. Are you sure about that? I wouldn't try to make 500 horsepower on 93. I would definitely use E85. I'm using SCE cut ring gaskets. I don't believe they're necessary though. Does yours have do you have the supercharged motor, Baby Shark? One 525 is nifty. It has to be perfect with no reserve left. Yeah, it'd be better to have some wiggle room. It's like trying to make 1,000 horsepower with 80-pound injectors. You can. For all 60 slippy needs some sun shells, sprag, clutches, wet servo, shift kit. So go with a mildly built 4L60. Is the one from Jags any good? The other thing that you could do on the 525, if you're not sure, is you could put a boosted pump on it. But I think that you could buy the pump for what you buy a boosted pump for. Boost pump's a little easier to install, and it only comes on under boost rather than having to do another pump. And I don't know how you're going to do the cage and that kind of stuff to put it in there. But a boosted pump is really easy to do. And then you just step it up to 17 or 20 volts, and then you'll definitely have enough. Do you think it's possible just to make 500 horsepower with specs I listed with a stock 706 head, springs, 8711 cam, Trailblazer SS? Let me see what that took. I think that's enough cam. Yeah, I think you can. Because I think when we were doing that, we were using the Dorman LS2 intake manifold. And that's basically the equivalent of what you have. And I think it took the 469 or 459 cam to get there with a 706 head. And so I think you have all of that stuff covered. And I think it made a touch over 500 the way that we test it, because we're awesome. Okay, so this was the LY6, which has a flat top piston but a valve relief in it. 706 heads, Dorman LS2 intake manifold, fast 72 millimeter throttle body, 1 7/8 headers. The 459 cam is a 617, 624, 231, 239, 114. The cam that you have is bigger than that. So if anything, it should help. And that one made 513 at 6,300 and 483 foot-pounds at 4,800. And that was a stock set of 706 heads and stock rockers on it. F1A 94. Okay. So that's a little more sporty than like a stock LS9 or something. Can I machine billet hanger? I have a machine shop. I can machine a billet hanger. There you go. Oh, 18 pounds at an F1A 94. That's pretty sporty then. But yeah, you don't need wire lock or O-ring gaskets for that. Also, I'm using a boost reference regulator. Yeah, and see what's going to happen, Danny, is the fuel pressure is going to go up with boost, which is a good idea, but it makes life a lot harder on the pump. The flow rate of the pump plummets after 60 psi. Debating whether to run LS9 or SCE head gaskets with my cut rings and an L92 with a turbo. We ran LS9 gaskets on the 1500 horsepower twin turbo stuff that we did on the Big Bangs. All of those Big Bang motors just ran regular gaskets, either Felpros or LS9 gaskets. You won't hurt a gasket. The gasket is not you won't ever hurt a gasket from strength because the gasket isn't strong enough. What you'll do is detonate it and lift the head because the head's not strong enough, or break a piston or break a rod or something like that. There's not a gasket like strength issue. Have you ever seen the manifold for the Datsun Z cars with a straight six that would adapt a 4-barrel Holley? Yeah, I have. How do you feel about fuel distribution on such a long manifold? Well, in one instance, I like the long manifold because it adds runner length. I don't think that this one did that, because I think that this one was, if I remember right, is a Holley and then arms that came off of it and then attached to the separator arms that go to the 3 ports. So that's not technically runner length. It might act like that a little bit, but I think that the fuel distribution for that would be every bit as good as it is for an SU feeding 3 cylinders. Have you ever seen? Yes, hit the thumbs up. 10 AN can be better than 8 AN. I've seen guys run 460s with 500 horsepower. Kind of new to the LS stuff. Can you run thinner head gaskets to bump compression? Excuse me. Yeah, you can. Most common sizes, 53s or 53 thousandths thick, or 41s are real common to add more compression. You don't T1, he doesn't have to worry about piston valve clearance by changing the head gasket by 10 thousandths. That's not enough. I mean, you can mill the head 30 and still have lots of clearance. How much of an advantage is to get a tune alone on an L33 over a stock tune? It's definitely going to add power, but you have to have the octane to take advantage of something other than the stock tune. The stock tune is designed so that everybody doing all sorts of knuckleheadedness can drive it and not detonate the motor. So it's designed to run on 87. And you can make more timing, or you can make more power with the more timing and the change in air fuel if that's a little bit rich. You're going to make most of the power from timing. And so you can make more power as long as you have the octane for it. Be sure to check piston to valve clearance. Do you have a camshaft in that 77 Camaro? Because if you have a stock camshaft in it, you don't have to worry about anything. You got miles of piston to valve clearance. And even if you have a small cam in there, you have miles of piston to valve clearance. Can I get away with turbocharging my high mileage 5.3 Suburban? All of the big bang motors that we've run have all been 200,000+ mile motors. Has DOD delete and fresh LS7 lifters, but original everything else? Yes, you're fine. And some of the new Gen 5 LT stuff, the bigger cams require fly cutting. Yeah, particularly on the L83, because that has the least amount of piston to valve clearance. It has less than the LT1s and L86s do. Have you ever heard of any relation between elevated boost pressure and valve float? Yes. I have a Corolla GR, and everyone claims back and forth that the valve float is what's preventing running boost. Are you having a valve float problem? That's easy to detect on a dyno. Not a stock cam, more like a BTR hot rod cam. Yeah, you still got a lot of clearance. We have cut 30 thousandths off of our cylinder heads that we have on our L33, and we have a cam that's like that hot rod cam is 217. Ours is 233 on the intake. So, and we're still running it. It's fine. So you don't have to worry about doing the head gasket. You are all good. You are all good in the hood. We've got 1 minute. I've been here more than an hour already. Aren't you guys tired of me? That test that I watched, the Red Bull drag race, that Ninja H2R, that thing got with the program, man. Claim cranking up the boost pressure any higher causes the engine to go into valve float situation. You can increase the likelihood of valve float, But I haven't seen that on any factory car. On every factory car that I've ever seen that has a turbo on it, you can turn the boost up on it. How much power does that H2R make? And I don't even know if this was a stock one or not. $310 horsepower? Holy moly. Kawasaki Ninja H2R. Wow. That's that's got to be really, really fast. Yeah, that's way more than 200 miles an hour. Does anybody know how fast that bike has gone? Torquepedia. Okay, now I gotta write this. Ninja H2R top speed. Now I gotta know. 249 miles an hour. That's what it's saying. That's fast. Zero to 200 in 16.8 seconds. Wow. Oh yeah, that's nice. It's not street legal due to its performance and lack of features. I think that's on the list of things I have to have with my McLaren F1, right? I think you're forgetting there's pressure on the other side of the valve. Is there pressure on the other side of the valve during overlap? I have an R1. That's more than enough for me. Any brand of electric water pumps you recommend? We always use the Mazir stuff on the engine dyno. I'm thinking more like 450 horsepower max. Yeah, that's not a problem. ATSV 3.6 twin turbo nitrous are a big trend on the street right now. What do you mean? What is that? H2R is not street legal. What do you mean it's not street legal? What does that mean? What does street legal mean? Any downside to pre-gapping prior to obtain boost? No, you're fine. Would 60 series Detroit turbo work for guys on Ellis's? I know what a trailer load is. I don't think so. Normally, unless you did twins on it, usually the diesel stuff is not big enough for. They just weren't designed to make a lot of flow. They don't make a lot of power. How do you know the best ignition timing for your car NA without a dyno? You can do it based on acceleration, or you can come here and tell me what your combination is, and I can tell you what kind of curve to put on it. Semi-trailer load, 53 feet of turbos. Are they all bad turbos or something? A Pureberg 400 series electric water pump. 249. 32,000 for the H2, 60 for the H2R. That's another reason why I have two CX-14 and a turbo Hayabusa. Ninja H2R top speed. I've always kind of wanted a Hayabusa. How much boost to cause valve float? On what? You have to be real specific about what you want to test it on. We have never experienced boost with valve float from boost. What was the first thing you tuned with a laptop, and did you nuke it? I'm not a tuner, so I don't do that. I only do that on my engines or the engines that I test on the engine dyno. And before I did any of that, I learned obviously a great deal about what they would need to begin with, irrespective of the laptop part of it. You have to know what the motor wants. Like you have to know how much timing a turbo LS needs or a turbo big block Chevy or any of those. You have to understand what the NA one does and then what boost does and what octane does and all those things. And then with the laptop, you're just giving it what you know that it needs. Then you just have to learn the mechanics of that. Like what are the keystrokes that I have to do to make it have 22 degrees of timing at the horsepower peak at 18 pounds of boost. You have to know those things ahead of time. No valve float. The myth is busted. No valve float with boost. Okay. Thomas, happy to help, man. $249 seems like that's really fast. And then you have to ask, would you be more likely to float the valves with a supercharger as opposed to a turbo that's going to have back pressure in the exhaust side, but not on a positive displacement or centrifugal supercharger? New to the channel, Bud has sent me over here. Welcome. Starting a D-Series Honda. Any machine shop services I should get done on it other than resurfacing? Goals. You're going to try to do 400 wheel horsepower on a D-Series? So you're going to put head studs in it? Are you going to put a deck insert and that kind of stuff on there? Where do I order a low buck truck camshaft? Go to richardholdnerperformance.com. What car do you regret selling the most? My Ford GT. I wish I still had. I had momentarily a 69 tri-power Corvette, which I regret selling. Maybe my first Camaro, my split bumper car. I'm a huge fan of the boosted styling, but gotta respect anyway. I just like that it's like a, for me, that's like a Skyline. You know, that's kind of that sort of thing. Porsche reduced the installed height on the turbo cars to help avoid valve float, but their springs are really soft from the factory. Wouldn't mind owning a B King naked boost. Is that something that's just looks like a skeletal frame or something? I'm not familiar with that. I like all the aero on it because I'm a top speed kind of guy. Not that I think I would be doing that in a Hayabusa. I've been 140 or 50, I think, on my GSX-R 750 that I had. I'm good. that's enough. I would just be. It's way too big of a bike for me, and it just would be profiling. Yeah, I would go up to a stop and then it would fall over. Even the 750 was actually a little too tall for me. The Pantera, I do like Panteras, especially the what are they? The GTSs or GT5s or something. Those are pretty cool with the wing, like the Lamborghini wing and all that, and the flares and stuff on them. Those are cool. How are the transmissions in those though? Speed is scary. I prefer a quick 0 to 100. I like going fast. Like I liked going fast in the Civic at Bonneville because it was, you know, you have a cage around you and all that stuff. You know, obviously bad things can happen, but still, I felt I would like a different cage in there now, having seen stuff and knowing what that is. I mean, it was a legal cage, but it's not. It wasn't like now I want a whole cocoon around me. But in a front-wheel drive car, that was not really a problem. What's the biggest lemon I've ever bought? Certainly, this latest Geo Metro I bought is the worst car. Can you do a D16 motor? What do you mean? Can I do it? Any old 30s and 40s cars that you like? I'm not really a fan of those. I mean, what's the car that what's the car from American Graffiti? I know that they had a 55 on it, but what was the other one? Was it a 34 coupe or something like that? Those are pretty cool looking. I mean, when I look at it, when I see him driving down the road or whatever, but I look at him and I go, oh, that's cool. I got hot rodded that thing. That's pretty neat. I mostly look at the engine that's hopefully exposed and has a blower on it or whatever. That's cool. But that's not my things. What's the best LS motor for what? For me, it's whatever the next one is. I like the one that's the next one that I have better than the one that I had. Jeff exploded his GTR at NOLA Motorsports at the half-mile shootout at 200. Yeah, that's not fun. We did some standing mile stuff at Lemoore. I did with Motor Trend. It was fun. CX-14 and Booster are well designed for speed. They're basically boring at 200. I don't know that 200 would be boring. I've been 200 and stuff before. Did NHRA ease up safety restrictions on late model stuff? No, they didn't. The cage that's in the Civic is like I said, when it went through tech and everything, it was built and to the rule book and stuff. And Bonneville rule books, the tech inspection for them is really, really I don't know. It's way more than NHRA because we're going a lot faster and we're farther away from people. So the cage structures and everything are very serious. But modern cage structures compared to when that thing was built are much better. They're, you're surrounded more and stuff. Have you seen the 4-cylinder LS base motor? Yeah, it's not a real motor. Doesn't really run. I've built Congo. I built lots of D series and B series stuff. I wrote 3 books on it and have the world's fastest on the Civic. I think it still is. We went 226 in the Civic at Bonneville. So I built lots of those. So I know what they do. And I have lots of videos up on my channel with, I don't know how much D series I have there because I haven't ever run a D series on the engine dyno. All of that really was chassis dyno stuff. But I think I do have some videos on D series stuff. I think I have some from the chassis dyno testing that we did. We did lots of, I have owned lots of D series stuff. I had 2 Civic Si hatches. I had a Del Sol, which was a B16. It was a real SI, a 99 SI. I had a VX, a real one, which I gave to my buddy Chad. That's still driving around. Got it for the fuel mileage on it because it was a real 49 state VX. People stop him, and they did that to me too. Stop him all the time. Dude, is that a VX? Yes, it is. I told him he needs to put the VX because it was repainted, so it doesn't have the VX sticker on the back of it. And I said, you need to get one. Just have graphics do it. Just put a graphics on there. Put that on there. I said, you will get stopped all the time. I'm a single cam guy. Yeah, they're good. You can make lots of power with them. We did lots of Jackson Racing blowers back then and all kinds of stuff. We tried to get a DX, not a DX, but a D series, the single cam SI motor in the 93 to go. We were trying to get that hatch to go 150 miles an hour. And so we were trying water injection, and we had the Oscar Jackson blower on there, had headers. We tried to build good cam and a ported head and all kinds of stuff. In the end, it was just a lot easier to do with the turbo. A VX. Yeah, the VX was the lean burn car. Yep. Yeah, it got 50. The best I did, like doing real driving, was 56 miles per gallon. I tried a bunch of different stuff with it. I put a Super One on my Supra so they would quit asking. Our K24 Civic ran 19 PSI with a 66 millimeter turbo and a completely stock motor. Yeah, put ring gap in it. Yeah, that would make a lot of power. We ran Ish had a K24. I have to look and see. It made 600 at the tire. I don't remember what the boost level was though, but it's probably up there like that. What was the 13s or 14s for what? The VX had VX only. I think that they were VX only. Lightweight aluminum wheels. It had the lightweight mounts for the accessories, and it actually would go into lean burn. So while you're driving and cruising down the road, it would be like 19-to-1 airfill. It's pretty cool. Over 300 horsepower, a Quave differential makes a big difference with a B&D series. We had CAS limited slips in because they were a sponsor of the touring car series that I was in US Touring Car when we run the championship in the Del Sol, and we won one of those for one of the races that we won, and we got to put that in there. And yeah, it was good. It made a big difference. We don't run those at Bonneville though. We run open diffs. VX had the hot air intake. It had a standard air cleaner assembly. It didn't have a hot air, but that definitely would help it make more power or help with fuel mileage. Can't drive a car like a VX while in a hurry. It was still 93 horsepower. That was a nice thing about it being a VTEC motor. So it was still fun to drive. If you wanted to get after it and rev it, then you could go into VTEC and have more power. I always wanted to turbocharge it. I still try to talk Chad into it. Dude, just put a little turbo on it. Because, like, 150 or 160 horsepower would be a lot of fun in that car. Can't drive a car like that VX while in a hurry. Oh, yeah, for people stopping. Yeah, because people come up all the time. Hey, and they ask the same thing. Do you want to sell that? No, I don't want to sell it. The coolest thing, though, about that car was, and this happened a lot when I was at Westech, is there's Brady, there's Bruno, huh? I would be like during the summer or spring, I would be in line, like going through a drive-through or whatever, and there would be flowers around, and the bees would come land on the car because it was yellow. They must have thought it was a big sunflower or something. But there's no bigger compliment than that. Is, hey, if the bees love you, you're a good person, huh? If bees love you and doggies love you, then you are a good person, huh? Oh, big yawn, I know. On that note, it is time to go because I've been here an hour and a half. I will see you guys all tomorrow.